Hello. My name is Luna. I'm 29 years old, a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. And after nearly a decade of deployments, missed holidays, and sleeping in tents beneath stars that never felt like mine, I was finally going home. I had imagined this moment for years, the warmth of my mom's cinnamon candles, the snow-laced porch lights of our Montana home, and the sound of my little sister's laughter echoing through the halls. Every December, I'd replay those memories like old cassette tapes, waiting for the day I could finally press play again in real life. So when my leave was approved for Christmas, I booked a one-way flight to Helena, Montana. I started packing 3 weeks early, not because I needed to, but because it gave me something to hold on to. Something real. I wrapped gifts carefully, a wool scarf for Mom, a fly fishing set for my older brother Gavin, a pair of embroidered gloves for my baby sister Emily, and for my grandmother, Martha, the only one who ever wrote me real letters during my deployments, a framed photo of the two of us on her porch, laughing like time didn't matter. I even wrote a note to myself that said, "This Christmas is different. You're coming home." But 3 days before my flight, I got a text that made my hands go numb. From Dad. "No need to come home. It's better this way." 8 words. Just 8 words. I stared at the screen like I was waiting for it to change. Like maybe there was a follow-up message. Maybe it was a joke. A mistake. Something. But nothing came. I read it again. And again. Until each word felt like a separate wound. No need to come home. It's better this way. What does that even mean? Better for who I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead, I sat down, took a breath I couldn't feel in my chest, and typed back just one word. Understood. Not because I understood, but because I was tired. Tired of begging to belong to a family that always made me feel like a stranger with their last name. I didn't call my mom. I didn't message Emily or Gavin. I didn't send a follow-up text asking why I already knew the answer. Because I had chosen a life outside the blueprint my father had drawn up for me. I didn't go to Harvard Business School like Gavin. I didn't become the picture-perfect success story like Emily. I became a Marine. A decision my father called a betrayal of family legacy. The night I left for basic training, my dad told me, "You walk out that door. Don't expect it to open again." And I didn't. Not really. But I guess some part of me hoped it might. That night, I just sat on the edge of my bed, still in uniform, still holding the scarf I had bought for my mom. Everything I had looked forward to vanished in 8 words. The next morning, I was still in my room when my commanding officer, Captain Darrell, passed by. "Saw your name on the departure list," he said, peeking in. "Shouldn't you be halfway to the airport?" I handed him my phone. He read the message, frowned, and let out a long breath. "Well?" he said, handing it back. "If that's their loss, it's our gain. You'll always have a place here." McKinley. That meant more than he knew, but I wasn't ready to stay put. Later that afternoon, Grace Holloway, my closest friend in the Corps, came by my bunk. My mom called. She said, "Still wants to know if you're coming to Vermont for Christmas. Don't make me lie to her again. I don't want to intrude on your family." I said. She rolled her eyes. "You are family, idiot. Besides, she already made you your own stocking." I smiled. But it didn't reach my heart. I need time. Alone. Grace nodded. Then hugged me. "Whatever you need. But don't shut the world out forever." Okay, I didn't promise anything. Instead, I made a different plan. I would still go to Montana, but not to my family's home. I found a cabin rental an hour outside Helena, near a frozen lake I used to fish at with my grandfather. It was quiet, rustic, and, more importantly, mine. For 2 weeks, I would breathe, maybe even heal. As my plane descended through thick clouds over Montana, I pressed my forehead against the cold window and let old memories flood in, sledding behind the house with Emily. The smell of pine needles and cinnamon. The echo of my mom humming along to Nat King Cole. I didn't cry. Not then. But for the first time, I let myself feel everything I had been avoiding for years. I wasn't going home. Not in the way I once imagined. But maybe, just maybe, I was finally heading in the right direction. I was 11 years old, the first time I realized I didn't belong in the McKinley family blueprint. It was a crisp October afternoon in Helena, Montana. Dad was showing Gavin how to pour concrete for the new barn foundation while I sat on the porch steps, scribbling cartoons into the margins of my science textbook. I wasn't trying to rebel, I just wanted to draw. I was a kid. My father looked up and said, "You planning to waste the whole day doodling?" Luna, I shrugged. I finished my homework. "You're a McKinley," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "We build / not sketch." That was my first warning. I was born into a family that measured worth in bricks and contracts, not ideas or questions. Years later, when I told him I had joined the Marines instead of going to Harvard Business School where he had already paid the enrollment deposit, he didn't yell. He didn't even blink. He simply said, "Then you're not part of this family anymore." And just like that, I was dismissed. My mother, Linda, stood behind him in the kitchen that night, arms crossed like she wanted to say something but never did. Gavin looked uncomfortable, sipping beer and pretending to read blueprints. Emily cried and whispered, "Don't go." But she was still too young to understand that I already had. The only one who stood up for me was my grandmother, Martha. She stormed into the house later that evening, wearing her bathrobe and rain boots, and told my father her son exactly what she thought of him. "She's your daughter, Bruce, not a damn employee. Let her live her own life." But his mind was made up. So I packed my duffel bag, kissed Grandma on the cheek, and left for boot camp with nothing but a sense of purpose and a stack of unopened college brochures. Over the next 9 years, I lived a lifetime in places most Americans never see: Kuwait, Syria, Djibouti. I saw fire rain from the sky and held dying men in my arms. I learned how to shoot, lead, survive. I learned that respect can't be inherited, it has to be earned. My unit became my family, and for a long time, that was enough. But some wounds fester, even in silence. Every Christmas I missed, I told myself it was just another day, just another patrol, just another checkpoint. But deep down, I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, one year I'd come home and they'd be waiting at the airport. That Dad would shake my hand. That Mom would hug me so tight I couldn't breathe. That Emily would shout, "She's back," and Gavin would lift my bag like it was nothing. None of that happened. Instead, every year I received a holiday card from the McKinley family, typed and signed in Gavin's blocky handwriting. No personal notes. No phone calls. Just generic cheer on glossy cardstock. The only one who ever wrote like she meant it was Grandma Martha. Her letters arrived on cream stationery with lavender-smelling ink. She told me about her garden, the neighbors, the birds nesting outside her window, But between the lines, I read the truth. Things weren't okay at home. When she had a minor fall this past October, I knew it was time. I requested leave immediately. Family's complicated, my CO said when I turned in the paperwork. But at some point, you gotta face it. I believed him. And for a few fleeting days, I let myself hope. I called my mother first. Her voice cracked when she picked up, Luna? It's really you. Yeah. I was thinking of coming home for Christmas. A pause. Then a careful, rehearsed tone. Of course. Sweetheart. Of course we want you here. Next came Gavin. Short and to the point. About time. Then Emily, who texted yes. I've missed you like crazy. For the first time in years, I let myself believe the fractures could heal. That maybe the war inside our house was over. But then came his text. No need to come home. It's better this way. The final verdict. I sat alone in the quiet cabin near Bozeman, surrounded by pine and snow, and thought about that sentence. I realized that I had built an entire fantasy around reconciliation, around this idea that love would eventually outweigh pride. That time would erase resentment. That family, deep down, always found its way back. But maybe some houses were just hollow walls and cold floors. Maybe I had never really been welcomed inside to begin with. So instead of trying to force my way back in, I chose something else. Peace. I lit the fireplace. I unpacked the gifts. I drank cocoa from a chipped mug I found in the cabinet. It wasn't the Christmas I wanted. But maybe it was the one I needed. Outside, the Montana wind howled like it had something to say, and for the first time in a long time, I listened. They say basic training breaks you down before it builds you up. That's the point. Strip you of comfort, identity, ego, and see what's left when everything else is gone. What was left of me, surprisingly, was me. My first morning at Camp Pendleton. I stood in formation, soaked in sweat and doubt. My boots 2 sizes too big and my brain screaming, you don't belong here. Luna. But for the first time in my life, nobody cared who my father was. Nobody called me the middle McKinley kid. Nobody expected me to inherit a company or follow some perfectly paved path. They just wanted to know one thing. Could I carry my own weight? I could. And I did. And I kept going. Even when my legs trembled and my lungs burned and I wanted to disappear into the California dirt. There was a moment during our second week when I nearly gave up. I was crawling through a mud trench under barbed wire at 4:45 in the morning. The cold seeping into my bones like regret. When a voice beside me growled, "Don't stop now. Montana." That voice belonged to Grace Holloway, a wiry, tattooed, no-nonsense force of nature from Baltimore. We'd been paired up by accident in chow line the first day. And from then on, she called me Montana and I called her Trouble. Together. We survived. We ran the same miles, got yelled at by the same instructors, cleaned the same rifles until our hands blistered. She had a scar running down her left shoulder. I asked her about it once. She just said, I was trying to protect someone who didn't want protecting. That was all she ever gave me. But somehow, it was enough. By the time we graduated, we weren't just teammates. We were sisters in a way blood could never define. After training, we were assigned to the same logistics unit. A year later, we deployed together to Kuwait, then Syria, then Djibouti. We spent more holidays together than we ever had with our actual families. And somewhere between desert patrols, sleeping on steel cots, and joking through MRE dinners. She became my anchor. I remember one night, our first Christmas overseas, we were sitting on the roof of a half-broken supply depot under a sky littered with unfamiliar stars. I'd carved a tiny tree from scrap wood, and Grace had decorated it with MRE wrappers and gum wrappers shaped like snowflakes. Ever think about going back? She asked, her voice low. To Montana, I stared at the sky. Every day. Then why don't you? I shrugged. It's complicated. She leaned back against her rucksack. Most people join the Corps to escape something, or to find something. Which one were you? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, both. I had joined to escape my father's shadow, but I found something much more valuable, a reason to stand in my own light. During my second deployment, everything changed. We were escorting a medical supply convoy near the Horn of Africa when an IED went off ahead of us. Chows erupted. The Humvee in front flipped. Smoke everywhere. Gunfire cracked in the distance like thunder. Without thinking, I climbed out of the vehicle and took command, coordinating the evacuation, pulling 2 wounded Marines to safety, and shielding a local family hiding behind a broken wall. When it was over, I had a shattered radio, a scraped-up arm, and 12 people still breathing because I didn't freeze. I didn't tell anyone back home what happened. But somehow, the story reached the local paper in Helena. Weeks later, I received a package, no return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was from Grandma Martha. Inside was the newspaper clipping with a yellow sticky note that read, "Your grandfather would be proud. Some people are born to build buildings. Others are born to hold them up when the world starts crumbling. You are the latter. Love you." Grandma, I stared at those words for a long time. I hadn't thought about Grandpa Hank in years. He'd been a combat medic in Korea. Never talked much about it, but always looked at me a little differently than everyone else. When I was 10, he gave me an old compass and said, "You'll need this when the people you trust lose their way." I still had that compass. It was tucked in the bottom of my duffel bag. Along with the medal I received a month later, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for bravery under fire. But what meant more than the medal was the letter, because it told me I wasn't wrong for choosing this path. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't lost. I was just not part of their plan. And maybe that was a good thing. The cabin I rented was small, maybe 600 square feet at best, tucked away near a frozen lake just outside Bozeman, Montana. Pine trees leaned over the roof, like old friends keeping secrets. And the only sounds I heard at night were wind and creaking timber. It was perfect. There was something liberating about solitude. No orders to follow. No uniforms to wear. No tight corners of expectation. Just wood smoke. Silence. And my breath fogging up the windows. After unloading my duffel bag and stashing the unopened gifts in the corner, I went to the local grocery store to stock up on essentials: coffee, eggs, canned soup, and a bottle of whiskey. I didn't plan on sharing. That's where I saw her. "Luna McKinley," a voice asked from behind the cereal aisle. I turned. There she was, Rachel Donovan, my best friend from high school. Her curly hair was shorter now, flecked with silver at the temples. And she had the worn but content look of someone who'd lived a lot since graduation. "Oh my God," she said, nearly dropping her basket. "Is it really you?" I smiled, caught off guard. "Hey, Rach." She hugged me like she'd been waiting a decade. "What are you doing here? When did you get back? Are you home for good?" I got in this morning, I said. "Just here for Christmas." Her brow furrowed. "Your parents didn't mention anything." "I ran into your mom at the pharmacy last week. She didn't say a word." He hesitated. "It was kind of a last-minute decision. Rachel's eyes scanned my face with the kind of intuition that only old friends have. She wasn't buying it. You're not staying with them. Are you? I shook my head slowly. Cabin up by Crystal Lake. She didn't ask why. Didn't need to. Instead, she nodded and said, "You want to grab coffee after this? At a local cafe that still smelled like cinnamon and college finals?" We sat across from each other like no time had passed. "So," she said, sipping her latte. "What happened?" I gave her the short version. The Marine Corps. The deployments. The silence from home. The text from my father. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. "Honestly, I'm not surprised." "Why?" She leaned forward. "Your dad's been different. Controlling. Moody. My parents used to do contract work with McKinley Timber. But he dropped them without warning. A few years back." My stomach tensed. "Dropped them? Why?" "No explanation. Just gone. And there's been talk. You know, other contractors being shut out? Big federal contracts showing up out of nowhere. Like magic. Government work?" I asked. She nodded. "Military projects. Training facilities. Storage sites. High-value stuff." I blinked. I didn't know McKinley Timber ever worked with the government. "They didn't," she said. "Not until a few years ago. Not until after your name started showing up in the papers. That hit like a slap. For years, I thought my father had ignored my military service. That he wanted nothing to do with the uniform I wore. But now it seemed he hadn't ignored it at all. He'd leveraged it. As I walked back to the cabin, snow started falling soft and soundless. Like regret, that night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of suspicion. I thought about the contracts Rachel had mentioned. About the sudden silence from home after the newspaper clipping went public. About how my father had shifted the family business in a direction it had never gone before. What if this wasn't just personal? What if it was calculated? The next morning, I made coffee and sat on the front steps, watching the lake turn to glass beneath the early sun. Then I heard the crunch of tires on fresh snow. An old pickup truck pulled into the driveway. A tall man in his mid-30s climbed out. Tool belt slung around his hips. "Miss McKinley," he called out, brushing snow off his jacket. "Ryan Cooper. I'm with the rental agency. They sent me to check out the leaky faucet you reported." I hadn't reported anything, but something about his easy smile made me let it go. "Come on in," I said. He worked quietly, replacing the faucet in 15 minutes flat. I offered him coffee, and he accepted. As he sipped, his eyes drifted to the dog tags on my kitchen table. "Marine?" he asked. "Yeah. Just got back on leave. My brother was a corpsman. Afghanistan. Didn't make it back. I'm sorry," I said. Quietly. He nodded once. "You're Bruce McKinley's daughter, right?" I braced myself. "Yeah." Ryan frowned slightly. "Must be tough, coming back to all this." "All what I asked?" He hesitated. "Look, I don't know the full story, but there's been talk around town about your family's company, about how they've been landing government jobs nobody else even knew were on the table. People your dad used to do business with are getting blacklisted. Others smaller firms going bankrupt." I said nothing, but inside, a slow burn had started. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching his truck disappear into the trees. What was going on in my hometown? What was my father hiding? And more importantly, what did it have to do with me? Bozeman was one of those places where people still smiled at strangers, waved from trucks, and baked pies for Sunday church. But that friendliness had an edge now, a nervous undercurrent. Like everyone knew something they weren't saying out loud. And somehow, it all pointed back to the McKinley name. The morning after Ryan left, I took a drive into town, not because I had a destination in mind, but because I needed to see, to feel, to remember. It had been nearly a decade since I walked Main Street as someone belonging here. Now, every glance felt like a question. Every nod felt rehearsed. At the coffee shop, the woman behind the counter recognized me immediately. "Luna," she said with a blink. "Wow. You're back." Her name tag said Claire. She had been 2 grades behind me in school. I smiled politely. "Just for a bit." Her smile faltered. "Well, welcome home." I sat near the window, trying to decide whether the tension in the air was in my head or in the walls of this town. Then I saw Emily. She walked into the cafe like a ghost, her shoulders hunched, scarf wrapped too tightly, long eyes flicking from corner to corner as if she were expecting trouble. When her gaze landed on me, she froze. "Emily," I said. "Standing." She blinked. "Luna in the flesh," I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. "Can I buy you a coffee?" She hesitated for a beat, then nodded and slid into the seat. "Up close?" My baby sister looked all debay. Hollow. There were shadows under her eyes. Tension in her yaw. She was thinner than I remembered. And there was a tremble in her hands. She tried to hide. "I didn't know you were back," she said. "Not many people did." She looked away. "Dad, I know what he said." Her lips pressed together like she was holding back a flood. "How's the PhD program?" I asked gently, steering the conversation. She glanced toward the door again, then looked at her coffee. "I left a few months ago." "What?" "Why?" She bit her lip. "Please don't tell Dad you know. It wasn't part of the plan." There it was again, the plan. The gospel, according to Bruce McKinley. "What's going on?" I asked, lowering my voice. "Why is everyone so on edge? What's happening with the company?" She stood suddenly, gathering her things. "I shouldn't be talking to you. If Dad finds out what." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He's not well, not just physically, mentally. And you need to be careful. Don't poke too hard." And with that, she was gone. The bell over the cafe door chimed behind her like a warning bell. That night, I found myself staring at the crackling fire in my cabin, whiskey glass in hand, wondering how long the walls of this family had been crumbling without anyone noticing. Or maybe we all noticed. We just didn't say it out loud. A knock on the door startled me. I tensed out of instinct. Combat zones do that to a person. I opened the door slowly. It was Ryan, holding a bundle of firewood under one arm and wearing that same quiet expression. "Leftover wood from another job," he said. "Figured you might be running low." I stepped aside and let him in. We sat near the fire, sipping cocoa this time. "You learn anything interesting today?" he asked. "More like unsettling," I said. He didn't press. He didn't need to. Ryan was one of those people who knew when silence said more than questions ever could. After a pause, he leaned forward. "You know your dad's name has come up in some serious contractor circles lately." I looked at him. He's been winning contracts that don't make sense. Like federal jobs nobody even knew were open for bid. Projects connected to national defense infrastructure. A guy I know in Missoula said it's like McKinley Timber just appeared on clearance lists overnight. My heart began to race. How is that even possible? Ryan hesitated. Well, they said someone on his team had security clearance. High level. Military. My blood ran cold. He saw it in my face. You didn't know. No. I said slowly. I didn't. He set down his mug. That's the thing. Luna. People hear, they whisper. But no one confronts. Your dad's always had pull. But now he's got fear behind it. As the fire popped and snow ticked softly against the windows, I felt something shift inside me. What had begun as a sad holiday visit was becoming something darker. Something deeper. I hadn't just returned to a broken family. I had stepped into a conspiracy I didn't even know I was part of. The McKinley estate sat at the edge of town like a fortress too grand for its own good. Too silent for the holidays. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since the day I left for boot camp, and the sight of it made my stomach twist. The front gate opened automatically as I approached in my rental car. Someone was expecting me. I parked next to my father's Cadillac and stared at the house for a moment. It used to be full of warmth Christmas lights. The smell of cinnamon. My mother humming old Frank Sinatra songs. Now, it looked like a museum of ghosts. The air around it carried the weight of things unsaid. I rang the bell, and the door opened almost immediately. It was Sarah, my father's longtime assistant. Her hair was pinned perfectly. Her face was as unreadable as ever. Miss Luna, she said with a polite nod. He's in the study. I stepped inside. The floors still creaked in the same places. The family portraits still hung in the hallway, though mine had been moved. Once proudly centered between Emily's and my older brother Nathan's, now tucked in the corner like an afterthought. I paused in front of it, my face in uniform, unsmiling, a medal barely visible. The glass was dusty. The study door was cracked open. I pushed gently. There he was. Bruce McKinley. My father. Still tall. Still stern. The kind of man whose presence filled a room whether you wanted it to or not. He sat in his leather chair, a glass of something dark in his hand, staring at the fire like it owed him answers. You came, he said without looking up. You sent for me. I replied. He finally turned his gaze toward me. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now looked tired. Not weak, but worn. Like a steel bridge under too many winters. I heard you've been asking questions, he said. I sat across from him. And getting half-truths? He smirked. This town thrives on half-truths. I leaned forward. You've been using my name, my service, my clearance. Did you think I wouldn't find out? The smirk faded. I did what I had to do, he said flatly. The company was dying. Timber's not what it used to be. The government needed infrastructure. We had land. We had workers. We had opportunity. You lied on federal forms. I said, you used military access tied to my record. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, you were gone. You didn't want the business. You didn't want this life. That doesn't give you the right to forge my name. You gave up your name the day you left. Silence fell like a blade between us. I stood. I didn't leave to abandon this family. I left because I couldn't breathe under your version of it. My father looked back at the fire. And yet here you are. In my house. Angry. But still under my roof. You're not untouchable. Dad. No, he said. But I'm prepared. That chilled me more than the Montana snow ever could. Emily's scared of you. I said, you've broken more than this company. You've broken people. He finally looked me in the eyes. Weak people break. Strong ones survive. I shook my head. No. Strong ons protect. He took a long sip of his drink. So what now, you going to turn me in? I haven't decided yet. I said, but I will find out everything. And if people were hurt because of what you've done, I won't stay silent. He stared at me for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, I never hated your service. I just knew it meant you wouldn't come back. My throat tightened. You never asked me to. I walked out before I lost control. As I stepped into the hallway, Sarah was waiting. Arms crossed. He's not the man he used to be. She said. No. I replied. He's worse? I left the house with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, I couldn't turn away anymore. That night, back in the cabin, I opened my laptop and logged into a military secure portal. With a few keystrokes, I pulled up my clearance logs, access timestamps, locations, usage records, and there it was. 6 separate federal contracts filed under my name. Dates I had been out of the country, locations I had never visited. One of them was flagged. Sensitive Infrastructure, Project Icarus. Buried under 6 levels of subcontractors. One name kept appearing, McKinley Resource Group. He hadn't just stolen my identity. He had built a shadow empire on it. I sat back in my chair, heart racing. This wasn't just about pride or betrayal anymore. This was criminal. And possibly dangerous. My father always said family came first. Now I had to decide what kind of family I was willing to protect and what kind I needed to stop. The deeper I dug, the more the dirt crawled up to meet me. Every new file, every contract, every corporate link led to another lie. What started as a few forged clearance records had grown into something monstrous, a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and defense contracts masked as infrastructure development. But the worst part, most of it was protected by people who knew, by people I used to salute. I spent days piecing it together. My military login now a ticking time bomb. I was risking court-martial just by being inside that system. But I had to know how far it went. And then I saw it. A series of encrypted communications between a Washington-based firm, Farsight Strategies Inc., and McKinley Resource Group. Hidden under vague project names like Northern Containment and Icarus Logistics. Some of the locations matched areas I had deployed to. Others were in states I'd never visited. But all of them funneled through one point of contact, Colonel James Wakefield. U.S. Army Ret. The name hit like a slap. He had been my superior officer during my first tour. The man who pinned my commendation medal, who'd once said I had the kind of leadership they don't teach anymore. And now, he was neck-deep in the swamp. That night, I called the only person I could trust outside the system, Grace Holloway. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year. She'd moved to North Carolina to care for her mom. I didn't even know if she was still active reserve. But I knew Grace, if there was still a fight in me. It had once been lit by her. She answered on the second ring. Montana, she said softly. Trouble. I breathed. I need you. She was on the first flight the next morning. We met at a truck stop diner off Highway 191. I handed her a flash drive. And as she scrolled through the files, her face changed. This isn't just fraud, she said. This is treason adjacent. I know. You gonna report it? I shook my head. I already tried. The Inspector General's office redirected me to an internal liaison. 2 hours later, my military access was suspended, and I got a routine security review warning from a blocked number. She leaned back. They're watching you. They're watching everything. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, a snowstorm had started. But inside, the tension was already thick as ice. Then Grace said, "We need a journalist. Someone who doesn't scare easy." He hesitated. "I have one contact. Old college friend. His name's Eli Barrett. Writes for a mid-sized independent outlet in Portland. Used to cover foreign ops. But he burned bridges, calling out a defense firm." "Perfect," she said. I called Eli that night. At first, he didn't believe it. Then I sent him a fraction of the data. 20 minutes later, he called back. "I'm driving to Bozeman." In less than 48 hours, we had set up a safe meeting point, an old ranger station in Gallatin Canyon. Grace stood guard while Eli scanned the files with the intensity of someone seeing a bomb before it exploded. "This story," he whispered, "could crater half the defense lobby." "Can you publish it?" I asked. He looked up. "Can I, Luna?" "I have to. But it's not just a story now. You understand that." "Right. They will come for you." I nodded. "They already are." That night, I returned to the cabin and found the door ajar. Inside ransacked. Drawers pulled out. Laptop gone. Family photos shattered on the floor. A knife stuck into my wooden table, not stabbed hard, but placed there like a calling card. I didn't call the police. What would I even tell them? That the daughter of a corporate giant, former Marine logistics officer, was now blowing the whistle on a shadow military-industrial pipeline. Instead, I called my sister, Emily. I said, "You need to leave the house." "Why?" "Because it's not safe anymore. For either of us." She was silent. Then, in a broken voice, she said, "He already knows you're digging. He's angry. Scared." "Good." I said, "He should be. I don't want to choose sides." "Luna, you already have." Then I hung up. The following morning, Eli called me again. "They've issued a legal block. My editor's been warned. Threats of national security leaks. But I've got a workaround." "What is it?" "I'm going to leak it myself. Open source. Full transparency." "You in?" I took a long breath. If I said yes, there was no going back. No military protection. No political favor. No family ties. Only truth and the fire it brings. I'm in. And just like that, the first ember was lit. By the time Eli's article went live, it was already too late to turn back. He didn't wait for legal clearance. He dumped everything: names, dates, contracts, falsified clearance records onto an open-source platform, accompanied by a piece titled "The Patriot's Daughter Inside the McKinley Defense Conspiracy." Within an hour, it had over 200,000 views. By noon, my phone was ringing nonstop. Some were from anonymous numbers, others from journalists, activists, ex-military. My name was now trending on social media platforms I hadn't used in years. Some hailed me as a hero. Others called me a traitor. And then came the threats. "You'll regret this. Your military career is over. You think you can take on the system." But none of them scared me like the one that came with a picture. A photo of Grace, leaving the gas station, taken from across the street. The caption simply read, "She's next." I called her immediately. "Pack a bag. Go dark." "I already have," she said calmly. You think I didn't expect this, but even her voice had a tremor. Meanwhile, Eli had gone underground. His editor had received a cease and desist. Farsight Strategies Inc. was denying everything, and my father, Bruce McKinley, hadn't made a statement he didn't need to. His silence was its own message. Then, 2 nights after the article went live, I was followed. It started after I left a small grocery store off the highway. Just past midnight, snow falling in thick silence. I noticed a black SUV parked near the entrance as I exited. Engine running. I got into my car and drove. 10 minutes later, I checked my rear view. Still behind me. No headlights. I turned down an unlit Forest Service road. So did they. I hit the gas. So did they. It was no longer a question. They wanted to scare me. Or worse, I took a sharp turn. Headlights bouncing off the trees. Tires spinning on gravel and ice. My heart was slamming like a war drum. No cell signal. No backup. Just me and whatever was coming. Then I remembered the old ranger outpost near Lark Creek. I'd hiked there as a kid. Still had the access key in my glove box. I veered left onto a barely there trail and killed the lights. The SUV shot past me. Tires screeching into the cold. I waited in the dark. Breathing. Counting seconds. Willing myself to stay still. 20 minutes passed before I dared move. When I finally reached the cabin, I locked the door, checked the windows, and slept with my hand wrapped around my father's old hunting knife. That morning, a voicemail came through from an unknown number. No words, just the sound of fire crackling and a woman crying. I knew that sound. It was Emily. They had her. I raced to the McKinley estate. The gate was open. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Emily, I called out. No answer. I moved room to room. Heart pounding. Then, in the dining room, I found her, tied to a chair, gagged, eyes wide with terror, and standing behind her, my father, his face unreadable. She came here, he said, begging me to stop this. You've infected her with your rebellion. I stepped forward. Let her go. This didn't have to happen, he said. Voice cold. I built everything from the ground up. For this family? For you? No. I snapped. You built an empire on stolen names, broken laws, and fear. He pointed to Emily. She still believes in me. She's terrified of you. He stepped aside. Then take her. But know this, everything you've unleashed, you can't control it now. These men you've exposed, they're not afraid of a McKinley scandal. They bury things deeper than death. I untied Emily without breaking eye contact. You can't protect her, he said. You can't even protect yourself. I stood, putting myself between him and my sister. Watch me. We walked out without another word. But I knew he wasn't bluffing. That night, the story broke national. CNN, MSNBC, independent outlets, even foreign media. Some focused on the corruption, others on the military angle. But one headline struck me most: Whistleblower Luna McKinley risks everything to expose defense fraud. The world was watching. But so were the shadows. The threats continued. Eli's laptop was stolen. Grace's car was broken into. I received a dead bird in my mailbox. A crude message carved into my front door. Silence is survival. Still? I pressed on. I began working with a whistleblower protection group. Laviers. Advocacy teams. Former soldiers came forward, some with stories eerily similar to mine. The puzzle was bigger than just my family. I had uncovered one corner of a national wound. And yet, with every step toward justice, the cost grew. Emily refused to speak publicly. Still scared, Grace moved to a safe house. I barely slept. But there was no turning back. Because once you've lit the match, you don't get to pretend there isn't a fire. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. The Congressional Committee had summoned me to testify hest ni and item, aclus tunin, not as a soldier, not as a daughter, not even as a whistleblower, as a threat. That's how they framed it. Potential risk to national security, compromising internal operations, discrediting military leadership during a volatile global climate. They threw every label they could, hoping one would stick. I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror that morning. My hair pulled back. My uniform pressed. My father's eyes staring back at me. But no trace of his legacy left in my soul. My hands trembled as I stepped into the building. Cameras flashed. Protesters screamed outside. Some signs said, "Protect truth tellers." Others, "Luna is a traitor." I wasn't sure which hurt more, being hated by strangers or being cheered by people who didn't even know the whole story. Inside, it was colder. The room was filled with sharp suits, dull eyes, and expressions carved from marble. At the center, the Oversight Committee, 12 members, all staring like hawks watching a lone mouse on the table. A woman to my left whispered, "Take your time. Speak clearly. But don't show fear." That woman was my attorney, a volunteer from a pro bono advocacy group. She believed in me when no one else did. Then the session began. They asked questions. They twisted words. They tried to make me say I was confused, that I misunderstood what I saw. But I didn't. I remembered every number, every signature, every conversation I had recorded. I had come prepared. Midway through my testimony, one of the senators, a silver-haired man from Virginia with decades of defense lobbying behind him, leaned in and said, "Miss McKinley, did it ever occur to you that the systems you exposed were designed to protect national interests?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Sir, if stealing from taxpayers, lying to soldiers, and funding private war machines under fake humanitarian projects is protecting national interests, then maybe the interests are broken." The room fell silent. For a second, I thought I'd gone too far. Then a woman in the back, young, maybe a reporter, nodded. Subtly, like she was holding her breath and I had just helped her exhale. It gave me strength. I finished my statement. And when I walked out, something unexpected happened. There were people waiting. Not protesters. Not press. Veterans. Women and men in faded jackets. Some in wheelchairs. Others leaning on canes. One of them handed me a small American flag folded into a triangle. "This was my brother's Prosit May," he said. "He died in Iraq. Never knew what happened to the funds meant for his unit. Until now." I clutched the flag like it was gold. In that moment, the noise faded. For weeks after the hearing, the world didn't stop spinning. News outlet debated me daily. Talk shows mocked me. A few brave ones praised me. My father's company denied all allegations. Lawsuits began piling up. Grace was subpoenaed. Eli received death threats. And I faded into quiet. I moved into a small cabin outside Missoula. Off-grid. I needed to breathe. To think. To not look over my shoulder every minute. There were days I thought I'd made a mistake. What had I really accomplished? The system was still intact. The powerful still had lawyers. And my family, what was left of it, was shattered beyond repair. Then, one day, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo of a young girl, maybe 11, wearing a backpack that had my last name on it, L. McKinley written in Sharpie, and a note that said, "Because of you, our school finally got the shipment we were promised. My brother is safe. My mom said you're a real-life warrior. Thank you. Love. Ava." I sat on the cabin porch, tears hot in my eyes. No camera saw that moment. No article was written about it. No legal brief mentioned it. But it was the first time in months I felt something return. Not pride. Not relief. Purpose. Not every war is fought with bullets. Some are fought with silence. With truth. With a willingness to be hated for doing what's right. I wasn't a hero. I was a reminder that no matter how dark the room gets, someone has to flip the switch. And when they do, even the deepest secrets don't stand a chance against the light. They say time heals everything. I don't believe that. Time doesn't heal. It reveals. It shows you who stayed, who you became, and what all the pain was meant to shape in you. 2 years after that hearing, the world had moved on. Politicians shifted their focus. New scandals grabbed headlines. Most people forgot the name Luna McKinley. But not everyone. One quiet morning in fall, I stood before a crowded auditorium in Denver. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't hostile. It was warm. Full of students, young, hungry minds, most of them veterans or future public servants. I'd been invited to speak at a university ethics symposium. I almost said no. But something told me this was the full circle. As I stepped up to the podium, I saw their eyes. Not judgmental. Not skeptical. Just searching. So I took a deep breath and began. "Hello." I said, "My name is Luna." The room held its breath. I was born into privilege. I wore a name that opened every door except the one I truly needed the door to myself. I shared pieces of my story. Not the viral headlines. Not the courtroom drama. But the silences, the loneliness, the moments nobody documented, like falling asleep with my boots on in a war zone. Or holding my sister as she cried. Or staring at a flag folded for a man I never met but somehow fought for anyway. I spoke not about being right, but about being real. About the price of truth. About the fear. About the fire that follows those who dare light a match in the dark. And when I finished, there was no applause right away. Just stillness. Then, slowly, they stood. Not for spectacle, but for respect. Afterward, a student approached me. She looked 19 hours 8. Wide-eyed. Nervous. She said, "I was going to intern at a firm that's part of a defense lobby. But after reading your story, I changed my mind." Another said, "I want to be the kind of leader who doesn't forget people like you." And a third, "You helped me believe my voice matters." I walked away that night without a medal. Without a check. Without a headline. But I walked away full. Later that year, Grace and I started a nonprofit. Echo Project. Its mission: to protect, mentor, and amplify truth-tellers inside the system: military, government, healthcare, education. We don't ask them to become martyrs. We ask them to become mirrors, so that institutions can no longer pretend they don't see their own reflection. Within 12 months, we'd helped over 50 whistleblowers. Some had been silenced for years. Others were just beginning to find the courage. Each of them had a Luna story, just told in a different voice. One of the last things my grandmother ever said to me was this: "Some people carry the family name like a crown. Others wear it like armor." But the rare ones, they break it open and let something better grow from the ashes. I used to carry mine like a burden. Now, it's a bridge. And as strange as it sounds, I don't hate my father anymore. I pity him. Because he never got to feel what I did that day in Denver, the quiet revolution of knowing you stood for something no money could buy. That your name means something not because of history, but because of what you choose to make of it. If you're listening to this, or watching, or reading wherever you are, know this. You will face moments where speaking up feels like stepping into fire. You will be told to sit down, shut up, blend in. You'll be asked to trade your truth for approval. Don't. The world doesn't need more obedient shadows. It needs more brave lights. And maybe, just maybe, your voice is the one that will crack the silence for someone else. I'm not famous. I'm not rich. I'm not even safe. But I'm free. And in a world that trades freedom for comfort, that's the most radical thing I can be. So if you ever find yourself alone, doubting, staring at the fork in the road between silence and truth, think of me. Think of Grace. Think of every Ava and every folded flag. And remember, you are not alone. You never were.